Hello, welcome to Dominion Life Now. I'm Curry Blake, your host, and we are continuing a study at looking at the life of a man of God named Dr. Lester Sumrall. As many of you may know, he was my pastor, my mentor. I would call him my Bible teacher, even though I didn't get to attend his Bible school. I went through a Bible school by being there with him and watching him and listening to him, asking questions about things. And so we started this yesterday, talking about his life. So we want to continue that on because there is so much about his life that is just fascinating. By far, he was the greatest man of God that I ever met. He was a very prolific writer, as you can tell by all of these books on my desk here, manuals. As we said, we've got, yesterday we talked about him being an expert in the area of faith, being an expert in the area of the gifts of the Spirit, being an expert in the area of spirit, soul, and body. These are the things he's known for. Now, another area that he was very well known for, probably maybe even more so than most of the others, is in the areas of demons and deliverance. And he actually wrote many books on it. Here's one manual that he wrote called Demonology and Deliverance. And this is called Principalities and Powers, Volume 2. Here's one on his total man, talking about the spirit, soul, and body that we have talked about before. Now here's one on human illness and divine healing. And it's, again, these are study guides that go along with CDs, DVDs, that kind of thing that you can get. He's got one on prayer. He's got Demonology and Deliverance, Volume 1, that is very good. Don't know what that is. There we go. This is something else. And then we have one on alien entities. Again, he wrote a lot on demonology and deliverance. And it was because, and the thing is, he was an expert, even to the point, think about this. He was such an expert in the areas of demon possession and demonology and deliverance that he was called into court as an expert witness, and in a murder trial, actually several different times in a murder trial, and because they were saying that the man wasn't guilty, and different things, and so the idea of demons came up, and so they called him in, and he started testifying. Now, and he testified about what demons can cause you to do, and so he said, yes, it's could easily be caused by a demon. And the defense said, yep, that's what we wanted. We wanted you to get our client off, get him declared not guilty because he was demon possessed. And Dr. Sumrall said, I didn't say that. He said that demons can influence you to do that, but at any moment you can choose to disobey them. So this man is guilty because he did it of his own volition. He might have been influenced. He might have had a demon telling him to do it, but he had to make the choice, and he could have made the choice not to, and the man was convicted. So again, and now all of that is in court record. Isn't that amazing? Demons and demon possession is in court records because of Dr. Lester Sumrall. And that's phenomenal. So he wrote all kinds of things. As a matter of fact, I want to talk about some of his different books and show you how widespread he was. Now here's okay. Don't know how this got there either. This is Gunsmithing the AR-15. No, that Dr. Sumrall did not write this. So I don't know how that got in my stack. Anyway, put that right there. Now, just to give you a wide range of everything that he wrote about, right? He wrote, strange enough, he wrote, you can conquer grief before it conquers you. See, he dealt with what we would call of emotional healing, that kind of thing. And it's amazing, because as I spent time with him, I've read, of course, all of his books. I've got every book he's written. I've got every CD set, every DVD seminar set. I've got them all. He was a lot of my Bible school, to be honest with you. He wrote a book on how to know the will of God. Now, this is actually in our bookstore. How to know the will of God. Amazing. Look at that. Little book. Why? Because you don't have to make it always thick to get your point across. Now here's just to show you how wide-ranging and even how prophetic he was. This book was actually written in 1980. 1980, think about that, 1980. And he wrote the book, Jihad, the Holy War. the destiny of Iran and the Muslim world. Now think about that, 1980. There weren't people writing books about this stuff in 1980, but he was prophetic in the sense that he saw and had the wisdom of God, and he wrote a book on jihad, a topic that is in the news even today. Well, not today, because they've got a new darling to preach on right now on the news called coronavirus. And so that's pretty much all you hear about. It's amazing. You know, for a while there, everything was Russia, 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 right? And then that passed. And now everything is corona, 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 right? And then so now that'll be there. And it's like I don't know, it's almost like a season series. You know how you can watch series on TV? It's like a season series. It's like they go through a season on this thing and then a season on that thing. And it's like nothing else exists. It's amazing. Absolutely no other news is happening anywhere, anytime, except something to do with the coronavirus. Isn't that something? So anyway, another book that Dr. Sumrall wrote was called Where Was God When Pagan Religions Began? Now this is really interesting. He goes into animism, astrology, Buddhism, Confucianism, Hare Krishna, Hinduism, horoscopes, humanism, Islam, Ouija boards, palm reading, the People's Temple, matter of fact. I mean, just Taoism, transcendental meditation, yoga, Shintoism, and he goes through what was going on and what God was doing. See, while Buddha was sitting under a tree, or I'm sorry, sitting under a cave, trying to find nirvana, God was speaking to a prophet named Isaiah, saying that a child will be born. See, while Buddha was admitting he didn't know and was looking for the answer, God was speaking the answer directly and specifically to Isaiah and saying a child will be born, a son will be given to us, and giving us details of the virgin birth of Christ. And it's amazing. God had been working all this time, and these other religions started by people saying, I don't know. And then they end up starting a religion on what they don't know. Isn't that something? So now, Dr. Sumrall also wrote about angels. Angels to help you. He wrote the book on angels. He wrote God's blueprint for a happy home. See, you have to remember, he was not just an apostle. He was not just probably even a prophet, I would say in many cases. He was definitely an evangelist. He was definitely a teacher, but he was also a pastor. And that was some of how I knew him as a pastor, so that we could talk. Now, one of the areas, as I said, that he is best known in is in the areas of demons and demonology and deliverance. So he wrote quite a bit along those lines. And he wrote the book on exorcism, right? The reality of evil and your power over it. See, that's one of the main things I liked about Dr. Sumrall. He didn't just talk about the problem or just give you biblical information. He showed you how you can apply the information to actually do what the Bible said and overcome evil if necessary. Supernatural principalities and powers. He says, do you think witchcraft, demons, and magic are bizarre but harmless nonsense? Well, you need to read that book. He wrote 101 questions and answers on demon powers. 101 questions and answers. He wrote Demons, the answer book. So all these things. Now, he also wrote, you can destroy the gates of hell. And he tells you how to do it in his little book. Now, he had some amazing experiences. And the reason he knew what he knew. Now, we were just talking about this before the broadcast. And the difference with Dr. Sumrall is he didn't just sit and read, right? It's important to read and study the Bible. But he didn't just do that. He also was out in the world, he was out doing the stuff. His life was phenomenal. He planted churches in Israel. He planted a church in Manila, Philippines, Bethel Temple. He planted a church in Hong Kong. I think it's called New Life Temple. He planted churches, of course, in South Bend, Indiana. It's just, he planted churches all over the world. And he lived there. He didn't just go plant a church. He didn't just visit and do a seminar. He would go there. And when he actually moved to Israel, you know, since I think it was I want to say 1957, something like that. From that date until the year he died in 1996, he never missed a year of going to Israel. He went to Israel every year and would lead a tour to go to Israel. And he would go to the places, and he knew more than the other tour guides about those places and what happened there. And he actually did some video recording that you can actually get a hold of at times, showing him in Israel. When he talks about Elijah, he actually goes to the place where Elijah was and says, this is what happened here. So it's really fascinating. But some of the reason he was an expert in the areas of demonology, faith, and I say, it's because he lived faith. And whenever he went through Indonesia, he actually encountered demonic powers and demons, things going on. Matter of fact, when he went into the Philippines, most people know that it was because of an exorcism that took place in the Philippines that actually launched the revival in the Philippines at the time. And there's a lot more to it. Maybe we can get into the story at some point. But that story has now been called Bitten by Devils. And he wrote a little book about it. And he put out a DVD and a video on it where they reenact the entire thing with the actual girl. And it was a young girl named Clarita Villanueva, demon possessed. She had, excuse me, had become a prostitute. And when she did, she became even more demon possessed. And so she got arrested. And whenever the police arrested her, she would curse them and they would die. And so it was big news, went on the radio, and Dr. Sumrall heard about it, and God said, you got to go do something. And so he did. And he eventually set her free. And then the court gave him custody of her to help her, because that thing would try to come back. And while she'd be sitting in the service, this thing would come upon her and she'd start to go back, and he would see her eyes and he would stop preaching, go, no, you come out. Don't you go back into her. You can't. And he would just set her free again right there. So that was a thing. See, but he experienced these things. That's why he was an expert. He wasn't an expert because of just knowledge of what he read. He was an expert because he actually lived it. You know, as again, we were talking, well, I'll tell you, he also wrote a book about the witch doctor. The witch doctor story is an amazing story of a conversion of a witch doctor, that the witch doctor, the demon that was in the witch doctor would actually tell the witch doctor, I want you to go get alcohol, drinking, liquor, and go get it. And he would get it and drink it. And when he drank it, the demon would drink it, and the witch doctor himself would not get drunk. But the demon would get drunk. And the witch doctor was perfectly normal in how he functioned, but the drunk demon in him would sometimes make him almost wobble around, but he's talking normal, no slurred word, nothing. He was perfectly sober, but the demon would get drunk. But the demon would make him do certain things. And so Dr. Sumrall encountered him and set him free. And actually, he ended up becoming a pastor over a church. So it gives you something, to think about there. So in Dr. Sumrall's life, now, this is what we were talking about before. I was talking with OJ, as a matter of fact, about this. If Christians, now, okay, I'm going to say something here that is really, boy, I'm probably going to catch a lot of flack over, but it is the truth. I have believed it for at least 40 years, and I still believe it. And maybe we can talk about this a little bit. Dr. Sumrall actually lived the life. He launched out at 17, went around the world, preached in 180 some odd countries at the time, pretty much every country of the world. He preached in countries that aren't even countries anymore. Now they're a different country. And he preached in places that were, just that they had changed over time. Now, but he traveled and preached. And then whenever he got married, he married a missionary, a woman named Louise Lehman. That's a great name for a missionary. Just like Jonathan Goforth was a missionary. But he married Louise Lehman, and I think they met twice. They met once, and then the next time they met, they married. And they had courted by letters. And she was a missionary in South America. And then they got together, and on their honeymoon was them traveling on a missionary journey for 50,000 miles. They went 50,000 miles on their honeymoon. That was their honeymoon. Now, see, that's a different mindset. But that's how Christians think. That's how real Christians. Let me tell you, this man was a real Christian, right? No doubt about it. He was the real deal. And a real Christian sees what it says in the Bible and then lives it. Simple as that. That's just the way it is. And I was telling OJ, if Christians actually read the Bible and actually lived it, their life would look like gypsies. That's how they would look. And the thing is, when you're a gypsy, when you live like a gypsy, and I'm not putting them, believe me, I'm not putting them down. I have some gypsy in me, which probably makes it why it's so easy for me to do the traveling ministry. But the idea is that whenever you travel like that, and you know that you're not going to live somewhere, but you're always going to be traveling, guess what? You travel light. You don't accumulate. See, that's the big danger in the Christian life, is you accumulate things, and then things become important. Why? Because the culture around you tells you that things are important. And the way, see, what you want to do is you want to gather things so that people will see you have things, so that people will recognize that you're prosperous. Because you think you're prosperous if you have things. No, let me tell you, if you have things, you would be more prosperous if you didn't have them, because you had to spend money to get the things. So if you actually didn't buy the things and you actually just saved the money, you'd actually be more prosperous. But most people want to look prosperous, so they buy a bunch of stuff that people can see, so that people look at it and go, aren't they prosperous? Well, they used to be. But most of the people you see that you think are prosperous aren't prosperous. They're really in debt. And whenever you have a shutdown like we've had recently, then unless something else happens, you start losing the things that you owe money on. And they start taking away from it. They repossess your cars, they repossess your house, all that kind of stuff starts to happen when you can't pay the bills, because you only own what you don't have to pay for and what no one can take from you. See, that's the only thing you own. Now, but a real Christian's life would look like a gypsy in the fact that they wouldn't gather and they wouldn't accumulate. They would travel, live the gospel. That's what Dr. Sumrall did. When he got married, he and his wife traveled around 50,000 miles, and then everywhere they went, everywhere he would go into places, he would move there and plant a church. When he went to Israel to plant a church, he moved there and planted a church. Whenever he planted the church in Manila, Philippines, he moved there. See, he moved his whole family there. And then same thing for Hong Kong. He would move there and stay there. But see, our problem today, most Christians are, we want to be normal, which means we want to be like the world, and we want to live like the world, and we want to have everything the world has, and we want the world, which usually means your relatives, because most of your relatives aren't saved, and you want your relatives to think you've made it. You want your relatives to think that you're prosperous and that you're getting along good, and you want to be held in high esteem in their eyes, and because of that, you go after the things that the world esteems, rather than the things which are eternal, which can't be seen necessarily, but you get to live. Listen, you can't buy the things that I've seen with my own eyes in South Africa, in Ukraine, in Europe, in Australia, and you can't buy that. You can't buy that. And I can't just sit here at home and see those things, and neither can you. And what that means is, you say, well, you mean I got to move to another country to see that? No, I'm saying you can't just sit behind a computer screen and watch videos of men of God preaching and go, wow, that's amazing, and hear their testimonies and go, wow, did you hear that testimony? That testimony, did you hear about what so-and-so did? Did you hear what they said? And you live your life, you try to live your life vicariously through people who have actually done things. And it's the people that have actually done things. It's the people that have actually gone out, launched out, did some things. Listen, of course you suffer some things when you do that. But when you look back, you think it wasn't really suffering. That's why I tell you, I don't have regrets on those things. Why? Because my life, there could have been jobs that I took that would have been a lot better paying, but I wouldn't have had time to study. And if I hadn't had time to study, I wouldn't have been ready whenever I went to South Africa. I wouldn't have been ready whenever I went to these different places. So there's a trade-off. You just have to decide what it is. And see, the problem most people is they have this poverty mindset to the point where, they spend every day, and it's sad. Here's the thing. When people have a poverty mindset, they still want to accumulate things because they feel like they are prosperous when they accumulate things. You go to their house and everything they bought is from the dollar store. And yet they've got hundreds of little knickknacks and all these things all around their house, and it's all from the dollar store. But because they have something, they think they're prosperous. No, like I said, you'd have been more prosperous if you didn't spend all your money at the dollar store, right? And hoarding up stuff. Now, one of the most amazing sights to me, one of the most ironic things, is to see a homeless person with 3 shopping carts full of stuff that they're dragging around and having to take care of. And it is amazing to me because, see, even in that realm, they still think prosperity is accumulating stuff. And in their realm, they're prosperous because in their community, in their social network, they are prosperous, right? Because they got 3 shopping carts as opposed to the guy that just has a plastic sheet that he can pull over him at night because he has nothing. So he's poor, but they're prosperous. But it's all in their mindset of how relative it is of what prosperity is. And so, you know, you got people that think that having a poverty mindset is somehow godly. It's not. The godly mindset is trusting God to meet your needs and the needs of others also. I'm not talking about stacking up money. I'm not talking about buying a new car every year. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about you focusing on what is important. Now, the problem is this. And we've, again, talked about some of these things. I want to get back onto Dr. Sumrall. But you have to realize, when I knew Dr. Sumrall, his church was on the street, and he was going to build a new church behind it. But his house was directly kind of behind the new church and off to the side a little bit. And when I was growing up, we used to have what they called Fox and Jacob's homes. A Fox and Jacob home, that was a home builder. That's the only person we knew of, the only contractor we knew of. And a Fox and Jacob home usually meant, in that day, we're talking about in the 70s, maybe in the 80s when it was, a Fox and Jacob homes could be bought for probably $50,000. And so that was a home. And so when I say a Fox and Jacob home, I mean a home that's probably around $50,000. That's what I mean. Now, Dr. Sumrall lived in that kind of home. He didn't live behind gates. He didn't live in a mansion with, 50 bedrooms and 25 bathrooms and, all this different. He didn't live that way. He lived in a house that many times we could walk over from the church, walk across the field there, and go to his house. And he'd be at his home eating peanut butter sandwiches. Now think about that. That's how, now understand, he was prosperous, but he was also frugal. But yet he would spend, something like $2 million, something like that, or $12 million, I can't remember the exact number, for a C-130 cargo plane. Why? Because he didn't gather. Matter of fact, all the money that was come in through his books went back in the ministry. And they took up 1 offering a year at the church for him. 1 offering a year went to him. Now, he traveled, and he taught at seminars and taught at conferences and things. And I'm sure that, I know he received offerings there. But I know a lot of times when he received offerings, he would go to a brand new church with a young minister that had 10 people. And because he was going there, the place would fill up, and there'd be 500 people come out to hear Dr. Sumrall. And while he was there, he would tell them, all right, I'm going to take up an offering for this young minister, and you're going to give to it. So he needs to build a church. And he would take up all of this money, and then he would give it over to that young minister to help establish his church. Why? Because he knew he had the Abraham mindset. He knew that if he made sure that somebody else got a better deal, that God would give him a better deal in the long run. He knew that he could trust God. That was the way he lived. He didn't drive a brand new car. Matter of fact, his car was leased. But when we were there, our car broke down, and we didn't have a car. And he found out, and he told his brother-in-law to get us, he said, get this young couple a car by 5 o'clock. And I don't mean maybe. And before 5 o'clock, we had a car. And it was paid for. It was given to us. And so, but that's how he lived. See, he didn't live like normal Christians live today, where everything is about them. And everything's about, how can I get this? How can I get your mantle? How can I get your anointing? How can I get my healing? It wasn't like that. He lived the life. And the problem is, a lot of people, when they live, if they don't live the life, if they live normal, they have normal. See, the problem is most Christians want to be like everybody else, and that was the problem with the Israelites. We want a king like everybody else. And God said, okay, I'll give you a king like everybody else, but you'll be sorry because I'll give you a king you deserve. And they got Saul. So there you go. So I'm just telling you that let this man's life, as we talk about it, let his life inspire you to be different, to live different, to not go by the social norms and let people tell you how, what it means to prosper and not tell you how to live, but let God tell you how to live through his word. Have faith in God. Trust God. I'm telling you, what God did for Dr. Sumrall and through Dr. Sumrall, he'll do for you and through you. But don't think you're just going to sit back and say, okay. He used to say, most people's favorite prayer is, gimme, 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 my name is Jimmy. And he used to say that all the time. And so that's how most Christians are, because he saw Christians that way too. Well, listen, I've got to go. The time is over, but I want to bless you and say just right now, make Jesus Lord. That means live the life he died to give you. It's a life of dominion, but it's also a life of service. Service, something that most people don't even know anything about anymore. So we are here to serve one another. So again, God bless you. We love you. We'll see you again next time. God bless.